probably all saw the recent news where the Big Cypress Conservancy District Commission advised against drilling out next to Golden Gate and pretty much stopped the Hughes Drilling Company from proceeding further until the EPA rules on it. How do you all feel, this is for all of you, about offshore drilling?
Good question, offshore drilling. And my background in that is I chaired energy in the Florida legislature for 2 years, so I have some experience in that. I support in general the idea of offshore drilling. However, we need to make sure that we have the technology, and we have the technology in place to do it safely and not have oil spills. Now, whether that's 30 feet or 300 feet or 3,000, I don't know. But I do know that we need to protect our resources and our shorelines first and foremost. If we can do it safely, let's do it. Nevertheless, I think that it also needs to be not only safely, but it has to be cosmetically correct. In other words, we should not be able to see any rigs from our shoreline. We have beautiful vistas, and we need to keep that. Fortunately, we do have now technology with directional drilling. We can drill from the shore, and we can drill out an incredible distance, probably more than 25 miles right now. And that means that we can put any rigs, we can have those silhouette rigs, we can place them well offshore so that they're not visible. But at the same time, first and foremost, we need to have safety and avoidance skills here.
Yeah, I think you're going to hear a lot of dittos on most of the questions you asked tonight because we're conservatives. I grew up in Southern California, so as a child, I know what tar balls look like. We had a constant tar ball on our beaches growing up, so I didn't know what a clean beach looked like until, gosh, I was an adult and went to Europe on vacation. Actually, I went to work in the U.S. Army, wasn't for vacation. So the challenge is being capable and competent in everything we do, whether it's offshore drilling, drilling for coal up in the Northeast, drilling in our backyards here. Whatever we do, we need to make sure that the process is controlled, and frankly, the U.S. government hasn't demonstrated a very good track record. It's the agencies that had these responsibilities of oversight, they weren't doing their job. So that's something that Congress can do, is put some more teeth into the accountability of the federal agencies. I'm with Dr. Kriegel. We don't want to disrupt any of our tourism attractiveness at all, and that includes the horizon. I mean, we don't need to be seeing those lights off to the distance. I mean, it's not something. Put it out there 100 miles, 150 miles, you're not going to see it. But the thing is, we don't want any spills either, because we will see that.
Last summer was my first foray into local politics, and that was in our struggle with the City Council of Bonita Springs, and whether we should do the DR-GR expansion that I'm sure some of you have heard about. And that's why I got involved in the first place, because I am concerned about the water. I'm concerned about the condition of the river. I'm concerned about the condition of the Gulf. And I think it's important because of our livelihoods, and more importantly because of our health and the health of the animals around us. And so we had that battle with the City Council because we felt like before we build any new developments in Bonita Springs, we ought to make sure we get the water right. And at that time, I never really planned on being a candidate for Congress because we had a congressman. We were doing this, and I was doing this because I felt like it was the right thing for our ecology. And I love the water, and I'm a scuba diver. So when it gets to offshore drilling, I ask myself why. We haven't done the pipeline. And I think that we can find plenty of oil, and be an exporter of natural resources, including oil, without having to drill right off the coast. So I'm very, very cautious, very, very skeptical. I say build the pipeline, don't risk the beaches, and let's bring the Everglades back to where it was 10, 20 years ago. That's what I say.
True environmentalists are folks who have a concern about what goes on in the Gulf. faux environmentalists are the ones who push drilling platforms out to the point where they became unsafe. So there was a problem with the Gulf spill that we didn't know how to get after it, and we languished. This is kind of the working on the fringes thing. We languished and tried to outthink perhaps the flow of oil, and obviously that didn't work too well. It went way too long. They were too deep. The notion that we can in fact do sideways drilling technology has actually improved during that time. But we lived up in Destin back then, and there were days that you saw no seagulls and you saw no pelicans, and many a tear was shed over the notion that we were killing the Gulf. So we need to be environmentally responsible. Obviously, the Keystone Pipeline is a no-brainer. The notion that we have someone that's holding that up in Washington, I find shameful. In this, we're all in agreement that we need to be environmentally conscious, and at the same time, if we fix our oil, if we drive the cost of gasoline and oil down, it's going to create jobs, because for every penny that we pay more for gas and oil, it's a greater burden on each one of us, on the truck drivers, on consumers. So we need energy. We can't just sit back and say, we'll wait for the sun.
I'd appreciate if you direct your question to one specific candidate. Yes, in the back.
Thank you, Mr. Werber, but I really, if I may, make an exception. This is a yes or no to all the candidates. It's a very simple question. Each candidate, will you support the Republican nominee in the general election at the end of this contest? Yes or no, please?
Yes.
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 I'll congratulate him or her, but no.
Next question. Gentleman in the blue shirt.
My question is this. We had a congressman here we thought was great.
Who are you directing this to?
I'll direct it to Dr. Dreikorn. But a congressman we thought was great turned out to be a big lie. The country is being destroyed every day by this president, members of administration, certain members of the Congress who have a real serious problem with the truth, and they outright lie to us and have been lying for a long time. Based on your 4 C's, I come from the business world. Okay, I believe in quantifiable results. My question specifically is, how can we trust you to do what you say? People get up and give us lip service about all the wonderful things that they're going to do, and it never happens. Consequently, others happen. If you could, through your 4 C's, give me some examples of quantifiable results that we can expect from you that can let us know we can trust you and we're not being lied to.
So, from the constitutional perspective, that is my standard. I mean, that's black and white. Now, what you've seen in this race is a lot of negativity. I have not been engaged in that whatsoever. When I get to Washington, when any of us get to Washington, there's this aisle that divides the liberals from the conservatives, from the Democrats from the Republicans. You do not have any ability to develop a coalition with a Democrat if he just stuck a stick in their eye. I realize that in order to get something accomplished, you need to be able to reach across the aisle and be able to build those coalitions. Even though that we might have differences in our principles, you need to find the common ground. And that's what I have done throughout my entire career. Now, once you develop those coalitions, you have some ability to get something done. You're no longer that one insulated voice. You become a much louder, amplified voice. Now, my experience historically is, I've been in the military. I know how a platoon works. I know how a squad works. I know how a battalion works. I know how a division works. You develop your organization, right? And you collect that and you strategize on how you're going to be forward and how you're going to be successful. So my military background is going to come really in handy in that regard. But also, I've worked in the federal government. I worked at the FAA. I was the #2 guy in the FAA for all production and airworthiness worldwide for new development of aircraft in certification, for safety. So I know how the rulemaking process goes. I know how the special interest does come to your front door and make certain demands, and I know how to push that away. I know how to push that away by going back to the standard. So that's how I would do it, and developing the coalitions, and of course the committees, and then keeping the constituencies in that forethought of everything I do.
Gentleman in the back.
This is for Mr. Netherwood. As a libertarian, and I certainly have a libertarian bent, where do you see America's position with regards to military internationally and diplomacy internationally? Because this is where the libertarians have a break from a traditional conservative.
Well, interestingly, just a piggyback on that, because I'm a libertarian and would be the first libertarian in Congress should this district choose to send me, it's not a matter of reaching across aisles, because I actually straddle the aisle. Because even though I will caucus with Republicans, and certainly whoever the speaker is, and I hope it would be Trey Gowdy, would count on my vote on fiscal issues and trying to downsize the scope of the government. So that's a given. But there are the social issues. There's the other part of the Constitution where sometimes Republicans run into problems, and that's why I'm no longer a Republican. But to answer the international question, there's the right side of the libertarian spectrum, which are the anarchists and want no government. And then I'm the guy that leans, I'm not far left, but I'm certainly much closer to the left. We have to be engaged in the world. We cannot become turtles and think that everything will take care of itself. We're an exceptional nation. We always have been. We're blessed with bounty, and we're blessed with genius. But we have a problem, and it's been festering for 5 years, in leadership and a swing to the left and socialism that has harmed us. Because the world doesn't look to us for socialism, they look to us for freedom, for liberty, for stances that are based on a constitution that we respect and not ride roughshod over. So we have some repair work to do in the international forum, and I would work towards that end, not trying to take us to a clam or a turtle position with foreign relations. I hope that answered it.
I want to compliment all four gentlemen who have agreed to run, because I'm sure it's not an easy thing to do. My question is this: I'd like to have each of you just very briefly tell us what you think the most important problem in Washington is that affects us in Florida.
In one word. So the question is, in our opinion, what is our opinion relative to the most critical problem, biggest problem that impacts the people of Southwest Florida? Am I correct?
Yes, and biggest problem in Washington.
And the biggest problem in Washington. Yeah, so, you know, I could easily go back to flood insurance, I could easily go back to the water, but I mean, that's really, that's something we can resolve at the state as well. And I have to say the biggest problem is that we're losing our American culture because of this downward spiral of entitlement. We continuously allow people to have a free ride. Right now in some states, it's $36,000 a year that they receive in entitlement. The average income in Florida is $34,000 a year. You know, until we change that, we're not going to get the government that we need or deserve, because people are going to become addicted. They are addicted to it, and the critical mass is going to go to the side where it's just going to be liberal for the rest of our life. So Florida, we're at risk just like the rest of the country. So you're looking for federal representatives to represent you on federal issues. Our economy is critical, our culture is critical, and that has to be fixed.
Of
course, I like a lot of what Dr. Dreikorn just said. Let me paint a picture. Unfunded government employee pension liabilities, $50 trillion. 50 trillion, maybe more. Number two, government deficit, $17 trillion. Our economy, our GDP is only 16 trillion, y'all. Number three, government expenditures as a percentage of the GDP, 24%. Number four, between the Treasury and the Fed, we print $80 billion of new money every month. Number five, we have a trade deficit of at least $500 billion a year. Number six, we have, at least $1 trillion in trapped corporate profits overseas. This is a colossal financial mess that will come home to roost. The money printing is going to stop when either the Japanese stop printing money or the Europeans do. Because at that point, the financial markets are going to look at us and say, no more. We need to get a handle on our financial situation. And I think in Congress, we have probably both sides of the aisle, congressional leaders that don't even understand what I just told you. And having been a CEO in a turnaround environment, in a mess that I did not create, I have taken those tough choices to turn this sort of thing around. Let's grow the economy again first. 3 million people dropped out of the labor force last year. Let's get that moving. I urge you to look at my 5% growth plan. And then let's get the deficit under control by making the hard choices. I say through growth on the top line and making tough choices on the deficit, we can get this financial mess back straightened out, but we've got to move quick. Thank you.
It's a triad. Barack Hussein Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and Harry Reid. That's the biggest problem in Washington, and it affects all of our lives. All of the debt that's been talked about, I want to point out, was not created by Democrats or Republicans. It was created by Democrats and Republicans. It was never a libertarian that created debt. And here's my fear. And someone who is the majority leader for the state senate, in theory, is a team player. And someone else who has a history of being a team player in a different arena, so to speak, that the first time a John Boehner or someone goes, you know what, we really need your vote on this, and even though you publicly said you weren't going to do something, that somebody's going to roll right over, that Ms. Benequisto not only won't be present, but she'll do whatever the speaker tells her to do. So even though we hear that, they have allegiances. My only allegiance is to you, and that, I think, is a big difference.
I think the biggest single problem facing our country is our incredible national debt, which grows every day, and it is joined at the hip with the entitlement programs we've got, because what we're doing is we are borrowing money on a daily basis and feeding it into entitlement programs, which is the largest part of our national budget. We're borrowing it and paying people to be unproductive. We're encouraging people to be free riders, not to peddle this canoe we're all in, but to be freeloaders on the system. We're getting nothing. If we were investing it in something, it'd be different to be borrowing money for that. But we're borrowing it and encouraging people not to be productive. That's responsible for our trade deficit. It's responsible for everything else we're doing. And in our lifetimes, I see a lot of gray hair out here, but for all lifetimes and in mine, we're going to see that this borrowing will come to a screeching stop when nobody else is willing to lend it to us. And there will be some inciting incident, and we're going to see the net result of borrowing yourself to death, and that is going to be some hyperinflation. That's going to hit everybody, but it's going to hit people on a fixed income with assets, fixed assets, no longer earning. It's going to hit you harder than most. We need to bring that to a halt. We need to make tough choices. In the Florida legislature, people ask me what I was most proud of. I'm proud of the Florida Constitution, which requires us to meet once a year and to pass not just a budget, but a balanced budget. We're not allowed to borrow one dime to make that budget work. It's a lot of hard decisions. You have to tell a lot of people no. You have to take a lot of people's list of what's critical and say, you know what, this part isn't critical, this is a wish list, and we can't do it this year. We have to put it off. Don't make a lot of friends that way, but if we did that in Washington, we wouldn't be in this pickle we're in. Thank you.
One more question.
Can
Yes.
I ask Mr. Clausen if he thinks that Social Security privatization is off the table, and if he would get behind the proposal to increase the cap? And does he know how much the cap is on Social Security payments?
I would do nothing on Social Security to damage or limit Social Security from the current retirees or anyone close to retirement. So I think that there's a fairness question there, that where we shouldn't do anything on anybody. Like, my parents are retired down here. Don't think it would be fair to change the rules of the game for them now that they're retired. So although we may have to restructure Social Security to save Social Security, it shouldn't be in any way on the backs of anyone that is currently retired or anyone that will be retired anytime soon.
Do you know what the cap is on paycheck payments?
I would have to look at. I'd have to be more informed.
$117,000. So anybody with gross income above $117,000 doesn't pay a penny over that 117. So a millionaire is going to pay $7,400 a year, just like a person making 117 is going to pay. It's disproportionate.
Thank you for that question. I would do a lot to change Social Security. I wouldn't privatize it, and I wouldn't ask seniors to work longer either. That's not the problem with Social Security. In this country alone, it's not the same in Europe, our disability program is part of the Social Security program. Disability in America has become the new welfare. When I was a kid, there was one person on disability for 65 people working. Now it's one person for 10 people working, and it's getting worse. If you go down here to the Social Security office at 5 minutes of 9 every morning, you'll see a big long line waiting for the doors to open. There's one thing missing from that line. Is any gray hair? These are not seniors. These are not people who've worked for 40, 45 years paying into the program, now getting their retirement benefits. These are people in their 20s who are retiring into Social Security on disability. Are they retiring because they have bad hearts, or they're on dialysis, they broke their back? None of the above. The number one reason for granting disability determinations today is emotional issues. Bipolar, tripolar, north polar, south polar, whatever. And, you know, when we had a Democratic President, Clinton, and a Republican Congress, they actually butted heads, got together, and actually lowered the number of people getting welfare. But once people on disability, with both houses of Congress and special letter from the Pope, you couldn't get them off disability. That's just the way it is. It's a permanent thing. The system's breaking not because you're living too long. That's a fraud. It's breaking down because people are retiring into it without paying hardly any benefits, or none at all, at the age of 20, 21, 25, and looking at a lifetime of 60 years of benefits. That's what I would change. You do that, and overnight, Social Security for people who work for a living becomes solvent and stays that way. Thank you.
I need to take just a little exception, because this has happened in other forums. We do have a math problem. The disability issue is out of control. But I have an 87-year-old mother-in-law. She paid in over her life into Social Security probably around $25,000 to $30,000. She's getting $1,100 a month. When Social Security's inception in the 30s, the life expectancy for both men and women was about 62 and a half or so. and now it's 78.3 years. We do have a math problem. So it's easy to say, oh, it's disability. Disability is part of it, but we really need to take a look at the growth of benefits, and we also need to take a look at the retirement age. Everybody's got a dog in this fight. It's not just those young ones who are trying to evade it. I may have to work longer, I may have to pay in more, that the cap in fact needs to be looked at, but it's not just one thing, it's multiple things.
We're gonna have a 2-minute summation. Ray Netherwood.
My teleprompter. I'd really like to thank everyone who's come here this evening and the sponsors that have put this together. As a libertarian, I want the federal government to get its house in order. We don't need to send someone to D.C. to make more and more laws. We need freer markets. We need to undo and sunset some of the mountains of overreaching laws or regulations that states, municipalities, businesses, and we the citizens have to deal with. That will be my focus. I join with Democrats, Libertarians, and those voters with no party affiliation who protest our tax dollars being used for mudslinging free-for-all masking as a primary election. If any party has multiple candidates for a race, that party should hold a convention or arrive at a method of selecting its candidate. Because up here in Lee County, about 30% of the voters are no party affiliation and can't even vote in the primary. And in Collier, that number is about 25%. So either NPA folks need to have a voice in primaries, or parties need to fund their own gigs. But we can't continue sending the same characters to Washington. No matter how well-intentioned, you don't need sock puppets that do party bidding. And you don't need confirmed team players whose response to an order from the speaker to jump is to ask how high. They toe the party line and in the end have one and only one concern, and that is getting reelected. You've heard the candidates tonight that want to go to Washington to represent you, and at times would have to use their best judgment in committees, in the House chamber, and during some lonely times when trying to slog through reams of reports, proposals, and drafts. You need to decide who can best do that, regardless of your party and regardless of his or her party. That's who your precious vote should go to. I say it's time to shake things up, to put the establishment on notice that you're not going to take it anymore. If you want to rein Washington in, and if you think we're fiscally out of control, if you're concerned about your privacy rights, if you feel our freedoms and liberties are under attack, then you have to do something different. Our $17+ trillion debt, okay, didn't happen overnight. It was both Democrats and Republicans. So for all the people that I meet between now and Election Day, do their research and all vote for me. You don't have to worry about the Democrat winning. I would win. So let's make history for Florida and the nation. Let's get serious now and send the first Libertarian to Congress. My name will be on June's ballot. We don't know who up here will be, but mine will be. So I ask for your vote. I'm on Facebook, Twitter. The website's ray2014.com. And I can promise you this, that if you send me to D.C., I will do my very best to restore America's exceptionalism. Thank you.
I don't need it.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Because 2 minutes was way beyond.
Well, we were generous with 4, so I thought maybe 3 would be okay. But thank you for your watch. It's very generous of you.
I'll take the wallet.
Well, you've already done that. They've taken my wallet, they've taken my pants, and my underpants.
We'll leave it alone.
I won't go any further.
Appreciate that. Folks, you know, I hear a lot of people running for office for the first time, they tell you what they're going to do, and I mean, you got to applaud them. They want to do something. You hear this person, that person say, I'm going to repeal Obamacare, I'm going to challenge the president, or whatever else. And I know they all mean well. What they're lacking is the experience of really representing a district, and that's what I've had, 8 years of it. Yeah, I made a few memorable speeches in Tallahassee, not too many. Got a few bills passed, not too many. I was able to stop a lot more bad ideas from ever getting going. That's probably the biggest thing you can do in legislature, but the most important thing we did in my office is constituent service. And what do I mean by that? I mean, on a daily basis, people call up my kid My kid needs to be on dialysis.